Hello, I'm Johnny Dorney, and today I will perform Japanese coded communications in World War II, the key to understanding the Pacific Theater. Before the Pearl Harbor disaster, the Army and Navy failed to anticipate the Japanese attacks, exposing weaknesses in American signal intelligence. Amazingly, just 6 months later, Commander Joseph Rochefort successfully translated Japanese coded communications, revealing Midway as the next target. Admiral Nimitz used his intelligence to defeat the Japanese at the Battle of Midway. These communications were the key to understanding Japanese plans and allowed Nimitz to turn the tide in the Pacific War, ultimately allowing the United States to defeat Japan. Hello, I'm retired Rear Admiral Edwin T. Layton. I just got back from the 10th commemoration of the Pearl Harbor attack. I dug up this old newspaper and read it. What a horrible day it was. We did not know that much about the Japanese, and even less about their coded communications. Amazingly, just 6 months later, we had the intelligence. We communicated this intelligence to the people who could use it, and in turn they understood its importance and acted upon it. Let's hear from two participants in the Pearl Harbor disaster. Hello, I'm Robert Thacker. I was a pilot in the Kangaroo Squadron throughout World War II. My story starts on December 1st, 1941, when my squadron received orders to take our B-17 heavy bombers to the Philippines. The United States had already cut off trade with Japan and frozen Japanese assets. Now we were moving bombers to their doorstep. We took off on the first leg of our journey on the night of December 6th and arrived at our first stop, Pearl Harbor, on the morning of the 7th. As it happened, we arrived at about 8 a.m., right in the middle of the first attack. As we were approaching the harbor, we could see smoke billowing high into the air. One of my crewmen said that they must be burning off sugarcane. But what about the waterspouts just offshore? Then the tower told us that Pearl Harbor was under attack. The smoke was from the battleship Arizona, which was sunk like 4 other battleships that day. But what about the waterspouts? Those were from falling anti-aircraft shells. All of the guns had been removed from our bombers to save weight, so we were lame ducks if we were attacked. Several of our bombers were attacked and were unable to fight back. Thankfully, we all landed safely, though 2 of the bombers never flew again. Later, we learned that the Army saw something amiss and didn't do anything. 2 Army enlistmen, George Elliott Jr. and Joseph Lockhart, were finishing up the night shift at the Army Mobile Radar Station on Okinawa Point when a huge blip showed up on the radar screen. Elliott called it into their superior, Lieutenant Kermit Tyler. The lieutenant did not take it seriously and said that it was probably us, the B-17s, coming in from San Francisco. He was wrong. They had the intelligence, but they failed to communicate. The blips were the Japanese attack force. Joseph Lockhart made this great radar plot showing the blips' movements. But at the time, nobody understood what it meant. Inter-army communications had completely broken down. Hello, I'm retired Admiral Husband E. Kimmel. I was the commander of the United States Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. I lost my job. As a Navy man myself, I have to agree with Colonel Thacker. Not only did the Army fail to communicate with themselves, they also failed to communicate with the Navy. Immediately after the attack, we were desperately trying to find the Japanese so that we could retaliate. But the Army never told us what Elliott saw on the radar screen. Some people say that I received intelligence that should have warned me that the Japanese were going to attack Pearl Harbor. I received no such intelligence. The Pearl Harbor Communications Intelligence Center Director, Joseph Rochefort, gave me daily intelligence packets on the Japanese coded communications received in the previous 24 hours. At the time, Rochefort's people could only decode about 10% of any given message, so most of our intelligence came from radio direction finding. However, the Japanese carrier attack group was under radio silence, so there was no way Rocher could have told me that the Japanese were coming. Now, many messages in the Japanese diplomatic codes pointed directly to war. Rocher's superiors were supposed to be decoding these messages. Washington even had purple machines which did all the decoding for them. If Washington had been doing their jobs and communicating effectively with those of us at Pearl, I could have saved over 2,000 lives on December 7, 1941. Thank you, gentlemen. The largest problem Rocher's analysts faced was the lack of messages in the codes they were trying to break. However, the April 18, 1942 Doolittle raid created a flood of traffic, which allowed analysts to break 20 to 30% more of the code, allowing analysts to decode the critical messages that foretold the Midway invasion. Let's hear from Admiral Nimitz, the commander of the United States Pacific Fleet after Pearl Harbor, who won the Battle of Midway on its 5th anniversary. In May of 1942, Joseph Rocher's people decoded several messages recalling Japanese ships to assemble at the island of Truk in the South Pacific. This tipped us off that the Japanese were about to mount another major attack. The question was, where were they going to attack? The people in Washington believed that the Japanese might attack anywhere from Samoa in the south to Johnson Island or Hawaii farther north. However, in some of the messages, the target was specified as AF. AF was one of hundreds of geographic designators used by Japan during the war. The first letter of the designator had been determined to signify what country it was occupied by. In March of 1942, Rocher and his Washington superiors agreed that AF represented Midway Island. However, by May, the people in Washington had changed their mind and thought that the Japanese had changed their system and were trying to trick us. Then Rocher recalled that all of Midway's water came from a desalination plant. With my approval, Rocher and Layton sent a message on May 19th via undersea cable to the radio operators on Midway. They were to send an unencoded message reporting that the desalination plant was broken and requesting immediate resupply. 2 days later, we intercepted and decoded a message from the Imperial Japanese Naval Intelligence Center reporting that the AF Air Unit sent a message reporting that the water supply was broken and that they only had 2 weeks' supply of fresh water. The people in Washington were still not convinced. However, the Japanese were very convinced. Their invasion fleet included 2 transport ships full of fresh water. Thankfully, I understood the Japanese communications and sent our carriers Yorktown, Enterprise, and Hornet to intercept the Japanese fleet north of Midway. As it happened, our carriers were in the perfect position to ambush the Japanese fleet. We sank 4 of their best carriers and killed 300 of their best pilots. The Battle of Midway ended a 6-month-long streak of Japanese victories in the Pacific and turned the tide in the Pacific War, ultimately allowing the United States to defeat the Japanese air and naval forces, leaving the Japanese mainland virtually unprotected. In 1985, Joseph Rocher was posthumously awarded the Navy Distinguished Service Medal by President Ronald Reagan for his part in the winning of the Battle of Midway. Even though the United States won the communications battle at Midway, the United States failed to retain this lesson in later wars in Korea and Vietnam, just to name 2. Before the Pearl Harbor disaster, the Army and Navy failed to anticipate the Japanese attacks, exposing weaknesses in American signal intelligence. Amazingly, just 6 months later, Commander Joseph Rocher successfully translated Japanese coded communications, revealing Midway as the next target. Admiral Nimitz used his intelligence to defeat the Japanese at the Battle of Midway. These communications were the key to understanding Japanese plans and allowing Nimitz to turn the tide in the Pacific War, ultimately allowing the United States to defeat Japan. Thank you.